It's always fun to introduce a colleague and a friend for quite some many years. In fact, I remember when she was shy and I had to encourage her to do programs like this. And Minoma Littlehawk Sills was born in Perryton, Texas, and was raised in Oklahoma. She is a member of the Cheyenne Arapaho tribes. She was raised by her Cheyenne grandparents, the late Daniel Warren Bigfoot Littlehawk and the late Leah Bearhead. She is the mother of two and a grandmother. Are you still two?
Well, I have three children and 7 grandkids now.
See, we've been together a long time, okay? And she resides still in Sealing, Oklahoma, with her husband. She says, sharing what it's like to be a descendant of Sand Creek, Washita, Little Bighorn, and other fights for survival is an honor and a blessing. I honor my ancestors by keeping them alive as I speak their names. She's worked as an interpreter at Romano State Park and at the Washita Battle National Historic Site and at the Little Bighorn National Monument. She's been featured speaker on Cheyenne Life for Northwest Oklahoma series of the Oklahoma Northwest, and she's extremely appreciated and she's highly prized for her knowledge. Those of us that are trying to preserve the history out here, this museum's called Plains Indians and Pioneer Museum. And also at Fort Supply. This is a shared history. We've talked about this many times. This is our history. It's our shared history of what happened with our forefathers and the people that settled and the struggles that they went through to make us who we are and to help us formulate our core values and learn from history. This is a shared history. And with that, I already know what a wonderful experience you're fixing to have. And and the fixing to will always be with me. I don't care if I'm a doctorate. Okay, I was raised in western Oklahoma. I was going to tell you, I am very pleased and honored to welcome our speaker today. You're in for a great educational, I started to say treat, but it's more than that. It's historical significance of our area. Thank you.
I really worked hard on this presentation because I was going to be covering areas that I hadn't done before. It ended up being like 25 pages, and then it shrunk. I had to cut it way down. So I want to ask you all for forgiveness before I start talking because I don't want you all to feel like I'm being one-sided. So with that, I want to say welcome. Epivashiv, it is a good day. Natista, I am Cheyenne. I was raised as a Cheyenne, but also through research and checking my lineage, I have Lakota and Pawnee blood. The curious thing about the Pawnee blood is that Cheyenne and the Pawnee were enemies. So I always like to think in a romantic way that maybe it was a Romeo and Juliet thing. Heoniava Nahishave Pod Woman. That is my name in Cheyenne, a name given to me from one of my grandmothers on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. Her name was Regina Foote. The Cheyenne is a Dakota word, which means red talkers or people of alien speech. We refer to ourselves as the people, tististas. And in order for y'all to learn to say that, if you hold your teeth together and say teetsy, tististas. Even though today there are two groups of Cheyenne, the Northern Eaters and the Southern Rope people, I was raised that we are one. We are Cheyenne. Throughout the late 18th and mid-19th centuries, we have occupied a region that extends from the Yellowstone River to the upper Arkansas River in Colorado and Kansas. In all, our territory extended over 500,000 square miles, covering nearly 8 states. I'm a descendant of the Sand Creek Massacre through Black Kettle, One Eye, White Antelope, the Washita Battle through Black Kettle, Little Rock, Skunk Woman, Frog Woman, and Man on Cloud. The Little Bighorn through Lame White Man, Little Hawk, Bigfoot, and Wolf Tongue. There are many other Cheyenne battles and ancestors that I could name that were across the plains of Cheyenne country. The strength that my ancestors possessed, what they had to endure, and all the atrocities placed upon them is why I'm here today to share with you. By the 1820s, the Cheyenne had moved to the Black Hills, and we became allied with the Arapaho, and so we began moving around with one another. Today, we are still separate tribes. We have different languages and different ceremonies, but yet here in Oklahoma, we're still considered one nation. But there also are Cheyenne in Montana and Arapaho in Wyoming, and those places up there are considered reservations. Here in Oklahoma, the only reservation is the Osage. Life would never be the same again for us. I love using the quote from Star Trek, when the Borg attacked. Prepare to be assimilated. Resistance is futile. The fight to keep our identity, the time of the Indian Wars was a time of survival for the people, for the testistas. The warriors were driven to protect and preserve. Most warriors preferred to dress to impress the enemy, to take advantage of their medicines, and to be ready to meet Mahale, our Heavenly Father. Some warriors stripped for action. They painted their bodies and were certain their medicine would save them. A large battle was complete chaos. Horses running into each other, rolling across the ground. Clubs, hatchets, and lances were swinging in every direction. Arrows flying from bows, cannon, and gunfire to fight against or run from. Dust so thick you could hardly see. Making a fierce rush during battle, jumping from their horses to fight on foot, and their feet hardly ever touched the ground because they were on the move so fast. When the dust settled, a sorrowful feeling would fill our hearts when we would see the loss strewn across the land. The wounded were transported by travois, the dead retrieved if possible, or buried on a field in shallow graves, under rocks, leaving what gifts that we could to aid in their journey. The dead were mourned and respected, but we had to move on. When our loved ones were laid to rest, their personal items were left with them in plain sight, so that they are prepared to live on in the spirit side. Respect and fear of the state of the dead eliminated any grave robbing entirely. There was no violation of the burial place by an enemy, even when the enemy was without weapons, until the Vichel, the white man, came and disrespected everything we were, owned, or stood for. I want to explain why we call white men Vichel. Vichel means spider. And spiders, they have those long legs. And so that's the way they looked at the white man, because he was crawling across the nation. Long legs to reach out and move. The Cheyenne and other tribes had lost complete trust in the word of the Vichel. Trails that were traveled had become raiding places for the tribes and the white men. Many travelers came from the east to travel across the plains. The raids intensified due to broken treaties, starvation, and because the Hodoba, the buffalo, were being annihilated. It was an all-out war from all sides. Women and children being captured, murdered, and mutilated. The desecration of those left behind in their resting place by the bluecoats and those traveling west caused such pain and anger. Finding a resting place that had been destroyed and belongings stolen caused our mourning process to just deepen. Finding bones scattered, missing, or destroyed, such disrespect has caused the spirit of the lost one to never rest, to roam as a lost soul. It's my personal opinion that a sweat needs to be done at each battleground to follow in the act of what my Numshin, my grandfather, taught me. And that was to pray for those who are lost so that they can cross over to the other side and go home. The old ones went through so much during the war on the plains. The hardest was the loss of life. At times we had no time to bury our loved ones. We had to keep moving to survive the onslaught of the fever called manifest destiny, a term used by the journalist John O'Sullivan in 1845. We were forced away because of the push of the westward move, heading west to look for gold, causing war, being forced on to reservations. We were torn away from our deceased to be left alone on the plains forever. Modern day, in today's world, it's hard to keep from the protocol of the medical field and in the funeral homes. With that being said, autopsies are now done, which was something that, we didn't violate the dead in any way. It is hard ceremonially to adhere to the medical field and funeral home regulations. It is hard to stick to most traditional ways now. We can only do the best we can with society and modernization changes that have happened. The body is not to be moved to too many places. We believe our spirits leave our bodies after death, but through our prayers and caring for the shell and the belongings, we guide their spirit on so that they may journey to the happy hunting grounds peacefully and joyfully. Wakes and funerals are very important to us, and and also to our extended family and friends. At some wakes, it depends on the family. They can have the body in their home. They can stay up all night with the body, with family and friends who want to sit up with the family that's lost a loved one. In days before the wake and before the funeral, visitors bring food for us, blankets, shawls, and other items to prepare for a giveaway that follows the burial. Traditionally, I was taught that anyone could come into your home and ask for or just take belongings that belong to the one that was passed away. I myself refused to let anyone go into my grandmother's room. She lived with me the last 5 years she was alive. I refused to put her in a nursing home. She used to kid around with me and tell me that if she got too ornery with me, to just put her in a home. And I would tell her, no, Grandma, I put you in the corner. You have to sit down on your hands till you behave. She would just laugh at me. I could not bear to let anything go. Some family and friends didn't agree with my wishes, but they understood. After all, it's modern day now. A lot of our traditions and a lot of our culture is slowly seeping away. Remembering back as far as I can as a child, traveling in a station wagon from Perryton, Texas, to the reservation in Montana every Christmas and every summer. The top of the station wagon would be loaded with belongings on the top, and there would be enough space left in the back of that station wagon so that me and my little sister could sleep as we traveled. As I slept, I would wake up every now and then, and I would wake up wondering and realizing I was dressed, but I didn't remember my grandma dressing me. She was able to do it gently enough to where she wouldn't wake us girls up. I would wake up to the sound of the highway rolling beneath me. And the sweetest sound that I miss terribly today is my numshim, my grandfather, singing peyote songs. As we traveled down the road, my grandparents would tell my sister and I history of the places that we passed. As a child, not realizing the significance of what they were telling me. There was always two ways we would travel up north. One way was going through Colorado, another way would be going through Nebraska. And as I done my research, I realized that we kind of still took the same trek as they would have done when we still used horse for transportation, only now it was the iron horse we were riding on. Now, fast forward to 2007, a door was open for a career in the Park Service for me. Not knowing the job I had accepted would take my life through so much pain and excitement. After all, I was raised not to trust the government, but yet obey the government's law or face repercussions. Being told don't talk to outsiders about our culture or traditions, they will not understand. I was raised by my grandparents who were raised by those who survived a time that has been forgiven but not forgotten. It is like it just happened yesterday. The emotional and mental pain had unknowingly been passed down to me, and it wasn't until I started doing my research after I was hired by the Washita Battlefield National Historic Site. What a blessing it was that a man from the Washita knew what walls he was going to have to help me break down. He had patience, I'm telling you what. It took close to a year in order for me to be able to speak to you all like I am now. He had the patience with me because I accepted a job that a Cheyenne was willing to share the past and the present. I was raised that our great aunts and great uncles are grandparents. Aunts and uncles are like mothers and fathers. Our cousins are sisters and brothers. So we have this huge family connection. And it was one of my grandfathers. He came to see me when I first got hired on at the Washita, and he was this gentleman. He was the type of fellow that carried himself with a lot of. He was proud, and he got the respect. He was one of our chiefs, and whenever I would see him from as far back as I can remember, when I see him coming to me, I knew I'd done something bad. I knew I had to prepare for scolding. But that day I didn't. And they used to call me Vihela. It was a pet name. It was a name they gave to me from out of love because I am a half-breed. And he would say, Vihela, come stools, come sit by me. So I went to sit by him, and I was thinking, oh, Lord, he's going to get on to me for coming over and working. And he said, I'm proud of you. He goes, you're not only going to break open the doors wide, but you're also doing something, you're breaking the doorway open for women, because not a lot of women would wear uniforms. He said, here you are in one. And he would tell me, that day he told me, he says, if you need me for anything, just get hold of me, let me know. He says, and I'll come check on you. He would just say, granddaughter, do good. A little bit of information and some timeline. A little bit about the treaties. Did you realize there were over 500 treaties made with American Indian tribes? 500. And primarily for land and for cessations. And all 500 treaties were broken, changed, or nullified when it served the government's interest. Policies toward the tribes were not limited to just the tribes on the plains. It is also true that some tribes have no treaties, and many tribes remain unrecognized as tribes by the federal government. This leaves them without a reservation trust land or federal programming. The fact is that many Native American people are suffering, and we all should care about that. It just blows my mind. 500 treaties. 1851 was the Treaty of the Fort Laramie. 1861 was the Treaty of Fort Wise. 1867, the Treaty of Medicine Lodge. And then 1868, the treaty with the Northern Cheyenne and the Northern Arapaho. By 1700, pressures were forced upon us to move to the Missouri River and North and South Dakota. In 1800, we formed an alliance with the Okalaka Sioux and fought the Crow Indians. 1825 was the Friendship Treaty, a tribe division of the Cheyenne, the tribal division of the Cheyenne and the northern tribes. So in 1825 is when we began the split. Also, there was Bent's Fort had been established in Colorado. May 28, 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, which gives plots of land west of the Mississippi River to Native American tribes in exchange for land that is taken from them. 1836, the last of the Creek Native Americans leave their land for Oklahoma as part of the Indian removal process. 15,000 Creeks who made a voyage to Oklahoma. 3,500 of those don't survive. 1850, the treaty at Fort Laramie gave Cheyenne land away again. 1851, the Cheyenne fought an ongoing war with the U.S. Army. Congress passed the American Indian Appropriations Act, creating the Indian reservation system. Native Americans aren't allowed to leave the reservations without permission. 1857 to 1879, Northern Cheyennes and Sioux were opposed to the construction of the Bozeman Trail. 1857, the first clash of the Cheyenne Arapaho with the U.S. on the Oregon Trail. 1866 through 1868, the treaty at Fort Laramie with the Northern Cheyenne and the Northern Arapaho. Such a large timeline, that was one of the reasons why I had to cut down so much. There are two confrontations that resonate in history. They are the Sand Creek Massacre, where my ancestors were brutally murdered and mutilated, and the Washita. I believe the Washita is a massacre. You don't attack a sleeping village and call it a battle. My great-great-grandfather, Black Kettle, was born in the Black Hills around 1807, a Sutai, a band of the Cheyenne. He was in his 20s when the alliance was formed with the Arapaho, and in 1850 he lost his first wife. November 29th, 1864. Because of tensions between settlers of the Cheyenne and the Arapaho were rising, John Evans, governor of the Colorado Territory, I'm so sorry. I need to take a breather here. Met with my great-great-grandfather Black Kettle and other chiefs to forge a new peace in August of 1864. Not everyone had left satisfied from that meeting. Black Kettle moved to Fort Lyon, Colorado, where a commanding officer encouraged him to hunt near Sand Creek. It was an act of treachery, which set the stage for November 29th, 1864. John Shivington, with a force of 675 of the Colorado U.S. Volunteer Cavalrymen, known as the Bloodless Third. Men who were bloodthirsty and carried out orders from a leader who was a minister. A minister. They went on a total murderous spree upon a peaceful camp of the Cheyenne and Arapaho. Early that morning, there was a rumble felt on the ground. It was said that the people thought there was a herd of Hodoma coming, a herd of buffalo. It was the howitzers rolling into camp as Shivington and his men approached the village. 148 of my ancestors were killed that day, and many were wounded. More than half were women and children. The Colorado volunteers returned to camp and killed the wounded who did not escape. They mutilated the dead. Black Kettle's wife was shot 9 times and she survived. And he went back to get her. My ancestors were put through atrocities that crushes my heart still today. rudely awakening to the fact it was bluecoats approaching with large guns on wheels, family being gunned down, being chased, running so hard that your lungs hurt, your heart pounding out of your chest. My family on their knees begging for their lives, being shot down with no mercy. Grossly mutilated bodies of my family cut open, babies yet unborn being cut out, parts of the body cut off and used as trophies and paraded through Denver. Learning in detail the grossly blunt truth of what was done through research is far different than learning from my loving grandparents. My first visit to the site as an adult, and it is still an emotional one for me, I was given time to stand at the fence that has been built on top of a hill where you can look down into the Sand Creek bed. The grief I felt was tremendous, because by this time I had been told from different elders, I had read so much, and as I'm standing up there, I'm praying, and I had this strong urge to drop to my knees, as if someone was trying to push me down. I stood there crying and praying. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. And being the Christian woman that I am, I said, Father, please forgive them. It was then that I learned the women and children were on their knees begging those bloodthirsty men for their lives. Later, I was told by an elder when I told her about my experience. And some of you may know this elder. Her name is Dr. Henrietta Mann. I don't know if any of you have heard her speak. She told me, she always calls me Noni. She said, Noni, the spirits of your grandmothers who died there are still living the pain over and over. She told me that they were trying to protect me by pulling me down to safety because of the danger that they thought was still there. Here is an excerpt from an Indian scout's letter to his mother, Captain Silas Sewell. I was present at the massacre of the 300 Indians, mostly women and children. It was a horrible scene. I would not let my company fire. They were friendly, and some of our soldiers were in their camp at the time trading. As I watched it, it was hard for me to see little children on their knees begging for their lives and have their brains beat out like dogs. I still am amazed at how humanity can be so cruel. And you know, it still goes on, not in the States, but elsewhere. There are still people fighting for their lives. We are very blessed to be living in America. On April 14th, 1867, there was a fight at Pawnee Fork, and Cheyenne escaped and left behind their belongings. 1868, the Indian Homestead Act was put into place. Washita, November 27th, 1868. Almost 4 years to the day of Sand Creek. Even after working at the Washita and knowing the history, I cannot understand why it's called a battle. And there have been meetings that have gone on between the national park and with the Cheyenne and Arapaho to try to change that name, but it seems to be for naught. We just keep getting put off. During the time on the plains when soldiers were attacking, we did not know them by name. We only knew them as bluecoats. Yes, there were those we knew, those who had gained our trust, those who married into our families, and those who had meetings with the men. The Cheyenne and Arapaho were able to evade the soldiers on the plains, and camp could be packed up in a matter of minutes because of the women. We had it down to a science. In Montana on the Crow Reservation, they have contests for women to set up a teepee. And there's a woman, the last I knew, could do it in about 5 minutes.
Men that it takes some hours.
Yeah, yeah. The first time I did it, it was a struggle. And I even had help. The soldiers could not catch us. We had the most powerful, dominant warriors on the plains. Warfare against us provided to be quite a challenge for the Bluecoats. Because we had our own army. We had our own soldiers. Until the winter of 1868, General Philip Sheridan reinstated Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. Custer had been convicted of desertion and mistreatment of soldiers earlier, and was suspended from the rank and command for 1 year, and only did 10 months of that sentence. Sheridan reinstated him to lead a campaign against us, the Cheyenne. Because of raids in Kansas and Oklahoma during the summer, Sheridan was frustrated by the inability of his officers to find us. And you know, I may have a pair of moccasins. I do have a pair of moccasins up here. They can show you that. When we walked through the plains, our moccasins have these little tag things hanging off. So as we walked, it would kind of mess up our footprint. And it would take a really good scout to be able to realize what those tracks were. Despite Custer's poor record, he was a good fighter. A camp of 51 lodges, my grandfather Blacktail's camp, was there at the Washita. We were never pursued in the dead of winter with snow on the ground, and knowing that gave us some peace. Not expecting an attack, everyone was tucked in their lodge, and at dawn the Bluecoats began coming toward the camp. A single gunshot is made by one of the warriors. The camp was on the run. Half-dressed, no moccasins, nothing to shelter them from the cold. Sheridan and Custer used the fact that we would not expect an attack in the winter, and Custer also used the campaign to gain back the credibility and to restore what he had lost because of his suspension. At dawn, the soldiers charged the village, a sleeping village. The village was mainly the old, orphans, and the crippled. Outnumbered and caught unaware, the killing began. Women and children began running for their lives, running through snow and icy water of the Washita. Within a few hours, the village was destroyed. Loss of loved ones, including my grandfather and his wife, medicine woman, later. And Little Rock lay dead along with others, and 800 ponies. One of the survivors had said that when they were killing the ponies, it sounded like human beings crying out. Because in the beginning, when they were killing the ponies, Custer was starting to run low on ammunition. So he had asked them to use their knives to kill the horses, and they were cutting their throats and made them ponies suffer. And ponies to us back at that time were like our animals in our homes today. You know, we love our animals. Those who survived were the 53 captives that Custer used as a shield to keep the warriors from coming down the river at bay. The soldiers were ordered to destroy all the belongings by fire. Other survivors were able to escape downriver and join the other camps. Many suffered from wounds, either from gunfire, cuts on their legs from breaking through the ice on the river, and frostbite. When I was doing some research in the Washita and the gallery area, I was reading one of the books. I can't remember which one it was now. I've read so many. I'm such a bookworm. I had found where Man on Cloud, who was my grandmother's uncle, was the dog soldier warrior who led those other warriors to the Washita battle. And he saved an old lady with a group of children. And it was him and his men who killed Major Elliott and his men there at the Washita. You know, with me, it's kind of like it's life. But they were killing my ancestors. But it was life. We all believed the same. That was one thing my grandparents always told me. We're all the same under our skin. They raised me to not be prejudiced. (1873), Crazy Horse encounters General Armstrong Custer for the first time. Now, one of the battles, this is where I'm connected as a Lakota. My grandfather's grandfather was Littlehawk. Littlehawk was a brother to Crazy Horse. And so there's so much history to that. And I have it all wrote down, and one of these days I need to write me a book. In 1874, gold was discovered in South Dakota in the Black Hills. U.S. troops ignored a treaty and invade that territory. 1875, there were approximately 15,000 gold seekers in the Black Hills. January of 1876 was a warning made by the government that we needed to move to reservations. If you do not, we will find you. At the Powder River battle that I had talked about earlier, soldiers attacked and burned the Cheyenne village. And then June 17th of 1876 was a Rosebud battle. It was a 9-hour fight, and Littlehawk, who I'm a descendant from, happened to be in camp, and he was one of those that was going around watching the surrounding area, and he saw the Bluecoats coming, and he went to camp, and everybody was already up moving around through the day, but he was able to get to camp to warn them that soldiers were coming. The soldiers lost that battle that day. June 25th through the 26th, 1876, the Little Bighorn. Known to me, as young as I can remember, as Custer's last stand. I remember going up there with my grandmother one time after it became a monument. And she took us girls through there, and I've got old photos of me. probably even more than 4 or 5 years old. But I remember a commotion. And every time we would go back up there throughout the years, we would always ask about what happened. I remember being pushed behind my grandmother. But I guess my grandmother wasn't very, she didn't, she said how she felt, let's put it that way. And I guess a couple days later, some reporters tracked her down at my grandmother's house on the reservation up there and wanted to interview her, and she said, no, I've done said what I had to say. And at this time, when the Little Bighorn's getting ready to happen, imagine this. Sears is opening. The telephone was invented. And the East were celebrating freedom. What about our freedom? Custer and his 12 companies under him, approximately 600 men, 210 of them lost their lives, including Custer and some of his own family members. In a book by Dr. John S. Gray, Centennial Campaign, the Sioux War of 1876. It is his estimate, after much analysis, that the village was comprised of approximately 1,000 lodges that stretched 5 miles or more. There were, out of those 1,000 lodges, there was about 120 to 130 that were Cheyenne. And there was probably 7,100 people there, and a herd of horses of over 18,000. It is said that when you were looking down from the Wolf Mountains, known as the Crow Nest, and that's where Custer and his Crow Scouts were, they could look down into the valley, and they said that the herd looked like maggots. It was that far of a distance, but you could still see the movement from the pony herd. Sioux, Cheyenne, and a few Arapaho, 1,780 of which were adult males. The ranks of those fighting that day may have swelled to 2,000 by the inclusion of older youth and some seniors and women. And there was one woman, her name was Big Head, and she was out there. The tables turned at the Little Bighorn, a bad judgment call by a power-hungry, arrogant leader. He split the men up to try and surround the camp. He miscalculated the strength of the warriors. It was said by Woodleg, it took as long as a hungry man to eat a meal to finish Custer and his men. About 40 to 50 of the original 210. Arrows rained down upon them on the hill. The warriors were so good that before the first arrow hit the target, there were 3 to 4 more in the air. Now, can you imagine as a little boy, from the time you're being able to walk, you get your first pony. You're taught how to make your bow. You're taught how to make your arrows, and they made a game of it. And you became so proficient that you could have that many up in the air before your first one hit the target. That's some pretty good stuff, I think.
That's major success.
Custer lost his life and the lives that were there with him. We had a victory, but we also had a huge loss. After this fight, the end of life on the plains was shortly to come to an end for us in many ways. And at the same time, it was a victory. By 1876, we were forced to move to reservations, corralled like a herd of animals, treated as thus in areas where that we were once free to live. The hunt was taken away. We were left starving. A lot, if not all, the promises made continually not followed through. Dogs were really important to the Cheyenne, and they still are today. And it was the women that realized that the dogs were trainable, that they could start doing the heavy moving for us, and until the horse were introduced by the Spaniards. So the dogs were like family. And when they began to starting us on these reservations, my ancestors were forced to kill their dogs so that their children could eat. But you know, times have changed. The old ones see us now giving us a war cry or a Lulu. Men do war cries, women do what we call a Lulu, which is and only women do that. So boys, don't Lulu. You don't want to be called girly men. They fought the good fight for us, their grandchildren. Today, a weapon that was meant to tear families apart and strip our language and culture and traditions away is now being used as empowerment for the people, and it's called education. In 1894, Palo Duro was the end of our life on the plains. Under attack, we abandoned all our belongings to save our lives. Again, the soldiers destroyed everything. Traveling, avoiding the trails, avoiding invaders, attacks and loss over time, the trails have become a favored raiding place for the tribes in the Bighorn. These traveling west became targets, along with their wagon trains and those in the frontier settlements. It was a means of survival, a different time and place. It was a major area of turmoil, and travel increased as time moved forward. It only confirmed the end of our life on the plains. The settlers and the growth of the nation would never stop. With my connection to these battles, the emotional, mental, and physical struggle that my ancestors endured being a direct descendant of those who died or fought to survive gives me mixed feelings of pride and pain. The Cheyenne has survived many hardships throughout the years, and we have made it because of my ancestors who made us strong to endure the changes that we would have to go through to live on, to keep our identity. And not only have we survived, but I intend to keep the memory of my ancestors alive by saying their names like I did in the beginning of this talk. And there are many more. They will never be forgotten, so that they can live on for years to come. Their words and ideas will remain. I am proud of my ancestors who gave me the answers for survival. There is something inside me that will not allow me to give up or quit. And the determination I have is not the only answer. It is that I'm Cheyenne, along with Lakota and Pawnee that runs through my veins. Today, war is no longer fought with war shields, bows, and arrows. Our fight is now with racial issues, with unemployment, poverty, sickness, drugs, alcohol, and hunger. We are not only fighting for our existence, but for the lives of our future generations. Today, we must use words of wisdom and maturity. To do nothing is to witness the death of my ancestors' dreams. My ancestors of long ago had a beautiful presence about themselves. They stood strong and majestic as men and women of the time. Their spiritual strength shone through with their confidence. They used their minds in a powerful way with determination going beyond the expectations of hard work, always respecting what the Creator has given them. And they had many endeavors and triumphs over impossible odds and overcoming them. At one time, they used their creativity in ways in their everyday life as they traveled like the wind, without any obstacles to hinder their way. I love and respect them very much. Despite all major epidemics and battles, we are still here. My ancestors' resilience was powerful. They maintained integrity, pride, despite the circumstances that were placed upon them. We remain. In the words of Chief George W. Harkins, 1832, I can cheerfully hope that those of another age and generation may not feel the effects of those oppressive measures that have been liberally dealt to us, and that peace and happiness may be their reward. And when the hand of oppression is stretched out against us again, let me hope that every part of the United States, filling the mountains and valleys, will echo and say, stop. I will end by sharing with you a Cheyenne proverb. No nation is conquered until the hearts of the women are on the ground. No matter how brave the warrior or how strong the weapon. I will not tell you goodbye, for saying goodbye is so final. As a Cheyenne, we say, I will see you later. Stai hissaforms. See you later. Hinahane. That's all. Shamak ho ho. Many things. I know it was kind of lengthy, and like I said, I had to cut back. Can you imagine what I could? That needs to be in another program. If you guys need to get up and stretch, and if you all are interested in what I have here, I can talk to you about that. I can share some of our customs and beliefs with you. I have 2 artifacts in this here, one of which I know is got to be dated at least 1850 easy. So if you all want to, yes?
Minoma, is it true that when they killed Custer that they pinned his ear to the ground?
Women took their awls and stabbed him in the ears. Yeah, and then they gouged his eyes because he would not hear and he would not see what he was doing. Even after having a Cheyenne mistress, which is another story for another time.
Minoma, I've been lucky enough to see this a couple of times. If you will, there's a couple of items here that I think that they would find very interesting to know what that is. Do you? Yeah, do you mind?
No, I don't mind at all.
You know what I'm talking about.
Okay. This was our first water bottle. The women, we were responsible for going to get the water at the river, and everybody, all the women helped. And so sometimes you'll see paintings or pictures of women with a wood rod on their shoulders, and they would have these bags of water hanging, and they would help one another. That's a bladder, buffalo bladder. Matter of fact, let me tell you this. The buffalo, the Hodoa, was our Walmart. Everything we used came from that animal, and the buffalo is still revered today. Another bladder, but it was made into a drawstring bag. A buffalo leg bone. It's got some little teeth on it. They used it to scrape the dermis or the layer off of the skin. And some of you, have you noticed that odor? Did you notice an odor when you walked in? It's that buffalo robe over there. it's brain tan. The first time I scraped a hide, Lord have mercy, took me 2 days, and every muscle in my body ached. Muscles I didn't even know I had. So, and I did that by myself, and the women did it collectively. And so, that's another story for another time. Here's another bladder that they use for like a wallet or a bag to keep things in. Paintbrush from the bone. This paintbrush was actually used on this. These are parfleches, these bags down here. They're rawhide. That would have been our couture bags, our Michael Kors, our Coach bag. Glue was from the hooves of the buffalo, and you could heat it up, and it would be like hot glue. You could mend a lot of things with it. A bone awl to help you sew. Another paintbrush from the rib bone, also used on these bags when they were made. These are all replicas, and the artist has signed everything he's made because he knows that there are those out there that would say that it was an authentic piece, and he doesn't want his work to be passed off as authentic. This is the buffalo stomach. Now, and we could use this for a water bucket. We could use it for a cooking pot. And they would be up from the flame good enough to where you could be cooking your meat and your wild vegetables and stuff that you found, your wild roots. And you know how you marinate your steaks? Everybody has their own way to do their steaks. Well, when this became tender, it was going to begin to fall apart. You could eat it too. I'm pretty sure it tasted pretty good. And here's another bladder that was made into like a billfold, a wallet. We used all kinds of animals on the plains. This is a porcupine tail. First hairbrush. Not only did we make things utilitarian from the buffalo, we got a cup, spoons. You can soak the horns, and you can work with them. It's hard, but you can do it. You can make a spoon. Here's another spoon shaped a different way. We also made toys for our kids. Here's a rib bone. This is called a snow snake. Needs to have a little repair to it. But you know the deal of making a rock skip across water? This is for the ice and the snow. And if you didn't have these tails on there, your rib bone would just spin. Whereas this would help it glide. And first paper dolls made from buffalo. Little bags for your daughter to play with. I've even got a miniature teepee, but I did a toy teepee that I didn't bring with me today. And this is called the finger bone game. You know about the cup and ball game? You get the cup into the ball. The ball into the cup. That's where it comes from. It's from this. Now, I used to be pretty good with it. It's been a long time. The object is to get this or one of the bones onto the needle, and there was points. You would earn points from wherever you got it. The button and string game. You would spin your button up. It's an old time game, and you would make your button spin. And if you were good enough at it, you could make it whir. You could hear the wind on it. I've got a coyote hide. Coyotes are brothers and sisters to the Cheyenne. Also a badger. Badgers bring good luck. This is an interesting. I have to share this with you. Mm-hmm. I was raised eating turtle. Remember being on in my grandparents' station wagon. They always owned station wagons. And we would be driving. And down back roads, we collected cans to help with funds. And if she saw a turtle, she would say, "Get that turtle!" Little box turtles, turtles this size, even soft shells. But most of the time we had box turtles. And here's a picture of my grandmother. She had just got through cooking this turtle. And we lived in Washita at this time, and the neighborhood kids knew when Grandma had turtle. We'd have 10 to 15 kids at the house wanting to bite. But you know what? It's good.
Do you still cook it today?
Well, yeah. Every now and then I get the urge. You know, I miss that. You know. Now this is where y'all are going to want to. The box turtles. And now the turtles were too big. She'd have us dig a pit in the backyard, and she'd put hot coals on them. And then she always knew. She was a pro at it. She knew when it was done. And in that picture, she was getting ready to take a screwdriver and a hammer and bust it open on the bottom. And we would eat the meat off the legs and some of inside. And turtles would have eggs, and she wouldn't share those with the kids. So even today, the last time I've had a turtle has been, I want to say at least 4 years ago. There are no eggs. I was just teased, "Grandma, you're still being stingy." So and I used to ask her, "What do they taste like?" Eggs. Well, but you know, it would be nice if you could share. But the box turtles, she tell us girls to get the turtles. She did have these big old buckets, and we would wash them off really good. She'd go in there and turn the oven on and get it good and hot, and she would throw those turtles in onto the rack. And when you knew it was how you knew it was time to eat, you didn't hear them anymore. But you know,
We do that to lobsters.
yes, exactly. But you know, when you're raised in a certain way, there's things that you remember and you love that your grandparents would do, your grandmother would do. Rib bones from a buffalo made into a sled. I've seen some sled a lot bigger than this, but this would be some of what we would put our stuff on to haul things back and forth, or the kids could play with them. I don't have very many men items because I was taught men's business is men's business and it's none yet.
Just men painted, women did beadwork, right? It was usually separated. It was no? They both did both?
Yeah. But there was knowledge that men had that women didn't, and vice versa. Just like, for instance, these gourds and these rattles, and a buffalo tail with toes of rattles. Tail was also flesh water. Only men have rattles. Here's a buffalo rattle, and I shouldn't have to tell you what part of the buffalo this comes from. No. This is another rattle made from rawhide, and how this is made, you work with the rawhide while it's wet, it's flexible, and you can cut it, you can sew it, you will cut it into its shape, sew it together, flip it around so your stitching's on the inside instead of the outside, and then you would take sand and pack it in there to help you form its shape, and hang it up outside and let it dry, and then it would harden. That's one way to make a rattle. Really, they were famous for recycling everything. The handle is from a chair, an old salt shaker. This is a little tough to horse. This rattle is very, very old. I want to redo it because my husband, he's a biddle, but he's danced a few times. And so he told me the only way he would dance again is if I made him a rattle.
Right. That make him two.
Yeah.
I wanna see that.
And these are men's moccasins. These are men's moccasins, all just because of the size. But the beadwork part, you know, they're like this on the toe. And these are called partial beaded moccasins. This is something that's a replica. And in those old pictures, you would see those Indian men wearing those medals. This is a replica from that. This red and blue blanket is called a gourd dance blanket. It's only for men. These are my moccasins. These were a gift from my Aunt Henry Mann. I made these leggings so I could have leggings for my moccasins that she gave me.
Did you do the beadwork?
Yes.
That is beautiful.
Thanks. We didn't always dress in our finest. We had workwear. My working moccasins and leggings and shoes. My leggings, when I was a little girl, that my grandma took and cut down from my daughter. These were my daughter's shoes. You can see her little feet on the bottom. This was mine. The only one I have left. I was the oldest, so there was hand-me-downs. This is one of something that's old. My grandmother made these for her mother. This is a teepee design. Now, if you look, there's these little points going around. Those show where she is at her age in life. Now, same maker, my grandmother, but look at the marks on those. She was old. My grandmother had breast cancer when she was in her 40s, and back then they didn't have the knowledge they have today. It was she ended up having her muscles removed from under her arms and everything in front. So she built muscle again, yes, but as she got older, she didn't have the pull to pull sinew through, to put the sole onto the moccasin. A moccasin starts like this. And then you cut this way, and then cut across this way to sew your tongue on. And then you would flip it this way, sew it together. That's the top. And so whenever we sew the tops on to the soles, which now we have the imitation leather, which is easy to work with. Back then we had rawhide, and sometimes you still would use rawhide, and this is buffalo hide. We would pre-make our holes. When she got to where she couldn't pull hard enough to put the sole to the top of the moccasin, and she taught me how to bead. I don't know, I cannot remember how old I was, but she started me out, and if it wasn't right, I had to rip it back out and do it over again. And then so she knew I could do the moccasin soles really good, and I came home from work one night, and she said, these are ready to put on sewed. And I said, okay. So I changed and settled in for the evening, and I put the soles on these moccasins for her. And this is how she made her extra money and made her living. And if you come up here and look at these here in a little bit, you can see her eyes were starting to fail. There's black beads all the way around, except for here, they're blue, because her eyes were starting to fail. But I got these put on, and she, like I said, she lived with me the last 5 years she was alive. And I took them back to her bedroom, and I told her my home was her home, and it was her home, by every means. And I took these to her, and I told her, I said, Grandma, here, these are done. And you know how you get old, you start shrinking. And she scooted a lot. I could hear her feet scooting down the hall, and she was saying, Vihla. And I turned around, and I thought maybe I'd done something. Maybe I didn't do it right or something. And she said, these are for you. About 3 months after she did these, she left. She was getting ready. And I used to always tell her, Grandma, I want moccasins. Are you going to dance? Well, yeah, I'll dance. But, she was making money, and she knew her time was limited. And when she gave them to me, she said, don't you dare put them up. You better wear them. So I have evidence I wear them. I've got to do a little repair where beads have come off. But these are some of my treasures. She taught us how to make a thread from sinew. This is off the back strap of a deer. She didn't like buffalo sinew. She said it was too hard to work with. So I never learned. But you can pull it apart and see it comes like threads. And you would run it through your mouth, get it wet, roll it on your leg, set it aside to dry, and then you have that point. And we have a metal awl now that we can pre-make our hole with, and you can use this to sew your, like a splinter or something. But you can use this for thread. If I don't have any sinew, or if I don't want to make any sinew, you can use dental floss. It's just as tough. This is one of my valuable treasures. You know how women will get together for quilting bees? Used to a long time ago, and I remember as a child being with all these old Indian women. I used to get teased that I was a grandma baby because my grandparents raised me. I was always with my grandma. And they would share patterns. And so that's where this comes from. And there's more. There's men designs on here. Like this one, for instance, I love the colors on this one. That's for Bear Butte, our sacred mountain that's in South Dakota. This, a teepee door. This one, a butterfly. And there's the design I used on my leggings, just bigger beads. The Oklahoma History Center, when Matt Reed was still there, wanted me to bring this in, and I told him, I'll bring it in so you can see it, but I'm not leaving it. One of my Lakota relatives gave me these. She said, here, sister, you can finish them. So they're not finished. I use them for, the show. This is some of my work. They're ready to have the tongue attached and sewed together. This design came off of here, and it's this one. Now, the item I was telling you that 1850 easy, I was telling you my man on cloud was my grandmother's uncle. He was the brother to Romano's Medicine Water, Iron Shirt, Comet Seba, and there were 6 of them. It slips me in line. But anyway, Romano's State Park was named after Romano's, Henry Carruthers Romano's. And so I know Man and Cloud, being his brother, was down in that camp in that valley when they camped there for winter. And his wife, Man on Cloud's wife, her name was Marble Hard Road or Strong Road. She taught my grandma to be because her mother had no sight. And so this moccasin turning stick was marbles. My grandmother had it, now I have it. Something to attach me to many places across where my ancestors were. Red-tailed hawk fan. Red-tailed hawk's my favorite bird. Here's a replica of our flint bag that we would have had on our belt, so we could start a fire to cook. These bags are the same thing, but only done out of respect and honor. This would have been the real deal to use, but it's a replica. Little moccasins I made for my little granddaughter. And you look at them, she's at the age where everything went in her mouth, including her feet. My grandma's turtle purse. And actually, I use it when I dance. I carry it with me. Carry Kleenex or something in it. But it's getting to where now I don't use it so often. I'm in a process of making a bag for me to use with my regalia.
Did men have turtle bags?
Well, yeah. They even had rattles made from little turtles.
Okay, just make sure.
Yeah. These are very old. They're minks, but they were for your braids. So here's the braid holder. I would have tied it onto my braid. Now you see those women, they have the fur and it's way long. I mean, the otter, yes. Here's a pin, my granddaughter's pin for her hair. My eagle plume for my hair. My grandma's chicken hawk fan. This stitching is called peyote stitching. The stitching on the moccasins is a lazy stitch. This is one bead at a time. And men, they are the bomb at this. They are the bomb. A lot of men do really good beadwork. Okay. My grandmother made this belt. The belt buckle.
What were the beads made out of?
Glass. But it came in on trade. Before beads, we used porcupine quills. And they were sewn into whatever we were making. And now you can get plastic beads. You can get glass too, but expect to pay more and they're heavier. This, it's been repaired a couple times, but it was mine. My little granddaughter has worn it. I think there's a picture on Facebook of her with it on. This was my daughter's dress. It's a tea dress. This was mine. Cowrie shell.
And is that black velvet?
Girl, I don't think I would. When trade came in and you could get material for a dress instead of buckskin, heck yeah. Buckskin dress is pretty heavy. And I'm in the works of making me one. I've got one cut out in my tote there, but I just haven't done it yet. Buffalo bag, a replica, my Michael Kors, my couture bag. Tea dresses, even the buckskins are made into a T shape. And the reason why they're a T, they're open here, so if you were with child and you were breastfeeding, just pull your sleeve up on whichever side you were going to feed your child on. There's a lot I didn't drag out. I didn't want to overload you all. And if you have any questions on...
So you have one artifact that was back to 1850 or so?
Yeah, the moccasin turning stick.
Oh, okay.
This was to help you flip the moccasin around. Because you sewed the moccasin on inside out, so you had to flip it around. And feel how hard that is. You can pass it around. You would need help to flip that sucker. You could dampen it to make it easier, but now we have this imitation sole, and it's easy to flip it around with your fingers, but you still need help to push the toe out. And you can see where it was sewn. But you would sit, and we can see one end's really small and one end's wider. You would hold it with your knees and you would work your toe out. You help push your toe out. So this is very, very old. Probably Osage orange.
Yeah, what kind of wood it is?
Osage orange.
Osage orange.
I was asked to have it carbon dated, but in order to do that, they got to take a piece. This has to stay intact. It has women's medicine on it. Nobody else handles it but me. At one time, I had put it away, and one of the chiefs told me, Minoma, don't do that. The oils off your skin keeps it alive. So I use it. It's been a while since I've made moccasins, but I still do them. And right now, I'm focusing on making things for Wally.
That everything inside the teepee belonged to the woman?
Heck yeah. Yeah. The only thing, the men were there to provide and protect. everything in that lodge was ours, including the lodge.
I read somewhere that there was like one woman in the village, and she was the head teepee maker. She had the tools and the material that gave her the whips and the loops and everything, and they would all get together like a quilting party. But she was the one that once they got it all set up, she knew where to mark it and where to cut it out.
Exactly. And there was clans. My grandma was a moccasin maker. There was the teepee makers. There's two women left that carry that title. And one is really getting very elderly. I mean, I seen her a while back, and she's really starting to get frail. And then another one, she's probably about 10 years older than me, but the teepee making bag got passed down to her. And then like the beadwork and the moccasin making got passed down to me because of my grandmother. She had a tattoo in the middle of her forehead. And I know that there were ways to show what clan or group you belong to. And I used to ask her why that dot was there. And she said, that's a story for another time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I got to where I got to be so busy working and life got hold of me. And even though she lived with me the last 5 years that she was alive, my job should have been spending every day with her. And it just couldn't be that way. Yes?
Do you always use, does it matter the kind of ceremonies you're having, whether you use things that are now made from synthetic?
Versus the replicas or the real deal?
The real deal, yeah. Does that bother? I would think, as deep as you all are, that it would bother you to not be able to use the real thing, rather than, for instance, the plastic beads or the.
I wished I knew how to work with quills. I don't. But I love the beads. I mean, you can look at this old pair of moccasins. You can tell by looking at them how old they look and faded. It was just a means of survival, a way to decorate our clothing. And beads are a lot easier to work with than quills. And it would take so many quills to be able to make a garment, to design it.
It'd be lighter.
Yes, it would be lighter, but it's just there's one lady that I can think of here in Oklahoma that knows how to do quill work, and I need to get with her and take her a gift and ask her to teach me. I don't know. I mean, if you guys have any more questions, feel free to answer. I feel free to ask. I'll answer because I was told that I was a bridge. Yes.
She had a question.
Yes.
The wedding dresses for
The leather for the wedding dresses from back in the day. Buckskin. I have an old black and white photo of my grandmother and her first husband. She was on horseback.
I seen her was the black house museum in Cheyenne, and I saw this squad dress, and it was so pretty. I think it was
They had one there, but it's now at the historical museum. But there's also those that, would make things like this dress, for instance. I loaned it to the Washita battlefield, and it got returned back to me. Yes.
They finally put a teepee up at the Washita battlefield, and didn't they do that a couple years ago? I read or something.
They do it a lot. When I was
the first one in like 100 years that it's been on the site.
Yeah.
Oh, that's.
No, that's not true.
Well, there,
Cheyenne brought it over from Hamlin, they brought TV, so.
yeah, well, but it was the Hammond Indians, it wasn't the park.
Okay, yeah.
Oh,
It wasn't the park. And I was involved with one of the first sweats that was at the Washita.
What year was that?
2009? Yes.
Did they make beads with bird bones?
Oh, yeah, all kinds. And then you got the hair pipe, the bones from the hair pipe, they call them the hair pipe bone. Yes. I didn't bring them with me. I have some beads that are actually bone. And they're really little, but they're not as little as these seed beads.
Minoma,
Yes.
I'm gonna tell them at, I guess we call it the battle site, for
Yes.
lack of a better term.
Yes.
When you and I went down the river is, today, you will see up in the trees.
Prayer
Tell
cloth.
us- Yeah. What? Prayer shawls.
Prayer cloth.
in the tree?
Yes.
Okay, the prayer claws are to show respect. They are to help the spirits there to journey on, or they're to, you hang on to that prayer cloth. You pray on it, what your heart feels. If you need help in your family, if you have an illness, pray over it. There's areas there at the park that you can tie them on. Some's on the fence, but the tree that I started using, I noticed others started using it too.
Now, is a prayer cloth a particular piece of material, or is it just anything you want to use?
I've seen t-shirts tied on. If they didn't have nothing else, they put a t-shirt on.
Significance of the act, not the item.
Yes,
Because
yes,
it's holy ground.
yes, it is holy ground. The one thing I ask y'all to remember when you get down into that valley, when you go to the Washita, keep in mind you're walking over blood.
Okay, I think I got it.
I brought this blanket because I wanted to show you some of those old black and white photos of the women. You see them with these blankets on. This is similar to what they would have wrapped around them. This right now is what we use today. We use this today too to keep warm. But this is our shawl that we dance in. Maybe one of these days I'll have a dancing lesson.
Thank you.
Well, let's give her a round of applause.
Oh yeah, you can. Feel how hard that is. The reason why it's so hard and stiff, it's like our suitcase.
Never seen
in-
one opened on the way.
Yeah,